Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business-focused podcast covering all things tech, engineering and innovation. Hosted by me, Chris Broome, a huge tech, motorsport and gaming fan, and also the owner of Longhurst, a firm of lifestyle financial planners and independent financial advisors located in Silverstone, Northamptonshire. This is a series of unscripted and unpolished conversations with leading business owners, thought leaders and high-tech talent where we discuss their experiences within the Silverstone business and motorsport region. We will also be asking them to share their knowledge, insight and their thoughts on the future just for you. If you're looking to learn more about the Silverstone high growth region and commercially connect with like-minded peers, you've definitely come to the right place. Welcome to Inside Silverstone. Welcome to the next episode of Inside Silverstone. My name is Chris Broome and I am your host. Today I am delighted to welcome to the show Debra Charles, who is CEO of Novacroft. Debra, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you very much.
Debra, I am very excited about this episode. If I can be completely honest, I saw you do a presentation, as you know, at Cranfield University probably 6-8 weeks ago, and I was stopped in my tracks, my chain of thought, by everything that you were speaking about, which we're going to cover off today, hopefully, about your sort of journey and some of the projects that you're involved in. So again, thank you very, very much for coming on. Right, as is customary, as I say at the beginning of every show, I'd love to quickly just do a quick career snapshot, if that's okay. Information I've grabbed off LinkedIn, just so that we can introduce you to our listeners and sort of hopefully justify and explain why we've asked you to come on. So is it okay if I quickly run through that?
Yeah, please do.
Right, so sort of career-wise, online at least, LinkedIn starts at 1998. So 98 to present is Novacroft. It's a current business, which we're going to come on to in a moment. And then in the last couple of years, 2018 onwards, you have launched and become part of something called the Kindness Movement, which we're going to talk about. You've also joined the advisory board of Cranfield School of Management.
I have.
Because you are an alumni of there, which we'll touch on. And you are also trustee of the Northamptonshire Community Foundation, which presumably is sort of charitable causes, etc. Before we get on to Novacroft as well as the Kindness Movement, what were you doing sort of pre-98?
Well, pre-98, because of my love of tech, I worked previously with Apple. Okay. And prior to that, Westinghouse in their robotics division. Okay. And at that time, we were responsible, and I played a great part in terms of taking robots into the car manufacturing industry.
Wow.
And robots doing brain surgery at that time. And then when I moved to Apple, it was just a fantastic opportunity for me to explore tech and take tech into the newspaper industry, basically.
And so were both of those roles UK based?
They were, yes.
Okay, so Apple in the UK.
Yes, yeah.
Fine. And what was it? I've got to ask the question. What was it like working at Apple?
It was amazing. I think for me in my early career, what was great about it is it really scratched my creative head in terms of it enabled me to flourish. Probably elsewhere I probably wouldn't have flourished. It gave me opportunity to do things differently. And I think that comes from my early sort of life. I felt like an outsider, and through sort of dyslexia and other things, I felt like an outsider. So both those roles played into the creative, adaptable sort of person that I am.
And presumably they provided you with the space to create and to not be sort of conventional, I guess, and to let your sort of cognitive wheels spin and come up with whatever it is you were designing and creating.
I think I've always had a wandering mind, a mind that looks around, that sees opportunities, wonders about things. How does that? When does that? How? Why does that? Etc. And when I was in robotics in those sort of early days, it just amazed me at the things that you could do. And then when I moved to Apple to go away from the sort of DOS environment into what you see is what you get, it inspired me to think, well, you could do anything. You can, if you can think it, you can make it happen. And by that just opened up my world in terms of thinking and how you could apply that to make a meaningful difference.
And then in 98, it led to the launch of your business, Novacroft.
It did. The year before, in 1997, unfortunately, I lost my parents, and it was obviously a incredibly an awful time. And prior to them both being poorly, I had sort of thinking, well, what next? What am I going to do for a career? The internet was starting to emerge. We were in the midst of Netscape, and I just wanted to make a meaningful contribution. I felt that at the time I'd been seconded to an organisation that was possibly less than transparent in the way that it operated, and it just made me think there's a better way. And also when I looked at people, that I am a true believer there's something amazing in everybody, and I think we don't necessarily harness that. And so I'd sort of been thinking about it. I had a job offer from an organisation in New York, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. And then actually, when I lost my parents, it gave me a privilege card in a way, and that's kind of sounds like a weird thing to say, but the privilege card was that any fear I had of doing anything disappeared. Yeah. And I just thought, you know what, I could do something, start something, and see it flourish. And that is about what can I do with technology and people as two pillars to do some good. And I'd seen, as I said, people and organisations behaving in a way that I didn't think was appropriate. And so I took that and started Novacroft. And Novacroft is the name of my mum's kennels. She had Labradors, and she showed and judged them around the world. And bizarrely, I changed my name after I got divorced. I changed my name back to the name of my favourite Labrador. So my name, Debra Charles. Charles was the name of my favourite Labrador, and I used to sit in a kennel talking to him.
Wow. And Novacroft was the name of the kennels?
Yeah, so my mum had Champion Labradors, and so it would be Champion, Novacroft, Charlie, Charles, etc. So.
Fascinating. And so your surname, as you've said, is also the name of a loving pet dog.
Yeah, he was a great dog. He listened to everything.
Fantastic. What a great story. And Novacroft is a business. So for those that are listening to this, so a lot of businesses within Silverstone Park and Silverstone Technology Cluster, but also wider afield, and also over in the States. We have I think 20-30% of our listener numbers are in America. For those that haven't heard of Novacroft, who are you? What do you do?
So we're a smart tech customer care organisation based in Northamptonshire. We typically enable organisations in energy, transport and now the charity sector to lean up and provide services. So if I take, for instance, in transport, we looked at Transport for London back nearly 20 years ago, and at the time the Mayor of London was having some terrible difficulties with students, etc., wanting to travel using concessions, but it was taking something like 48 days to actually get a card.
Right.
So we looked at that process, it's a very manual process, and we basically leaned up the process, took it online, built the front end of the back office systems, and produced the cards and provide the customer care for that.
Okay.
And basically enabled Transport for London to get the cards into the hands of their passengers.
And that was one of the first projects you did?
That was one of the first projects.
Wow.
So.
And what was that like pitching for that business and getting? Because that's a huge name and a huge contract and one huge pressure.
Yeah.
And if you pull it off, that's great for PR and great for your team's confidence and sort of ability to push forward. So what was that like getting that? Can you remember?
Absolutely stunningly amazing. I do remember, I think when I started the business, I thought in terms of millions rather than thinking small business. So to impact millions of people, and if you, so I think it's about vision. And for me to visualize that I wanted to make an impact on society in a big way meant looking at organizations like that. And for me, that's really important. And so when I was sort of pitching for it, I had looked around, so I'm big into research and development. That also means repeat and duplicate. So when you're looking, I looked at, for instance, different sectors to see how they were doing things and applied it into the transport sector.
Okay.
And I do remember, though, in one negotiating meeting for the contract, the end sort of phase of it, the meeting was actually held in about the 12th floor. And at the end of the office, it jutted out with floor-to-ceiling windows. And I walked over to it, and basically I felt like I was suspended out of the building and started to pass out.
Oh, my God.
And had to go and be taken outside. So in the middle of a negotiation,
you had a little moment.
Meaningful impact.
Well, you showed that you're human, right? And I mean, certainly for your senses at that time. But you got the contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Some things that I've pulled off the websites, the solutions that you offer. I'm just going to read all of these out, so just so that our listeners understand sort of some of the areas. So we've got something called smart ticketing, data management and mining, software design, back office systems, smart called presentation, customer care, centre support, mobile app development. Quite a lot. As well as a phrase I've seen on the website a few times called smart technology, saying smart technology. So what would be your definition of smart technology? What is that today, in today's society?
So in terms of smart technology, and if we look at, for instance, in the transport sector, we're about enabling people to get what they want to do as easy as possible and to have a better experience. So whether it's a website or a mobile app or a smart card to travel, we developed the technology behind it and the infrastructure on the cards to be able to use those in the field. In the charity sector, we might see that in terms of how do we help the charity sector engage their volunteers more effectively. Yeah,
I've seen something on the website, 70,000 volunteers supported by Novacroft.
So that was 2012, where we played what I believe a meaningful impact in the Olympic Games. And Novacroft did an amazing job, 70,000 volunteers. And I think that changed the face of volunteering actually in the UK.
Did it?
Massive. For our part in that was really enabling the volunteers to come together to be able to travel around London and the outlying areas as effectively as possible. And we coordinated that. We had set up systems to manage them, to manage their travel, to look at areas where there were challenges and be able to move them around, to give a seamless experience that ensured that the games were run successfully.
And presumably that was also done with Transport for London.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Useful connection.
It's a in terms of the way that I've always operated, it's about partnership. And with Transport for London, we've had a fantastic partnership with them, and it's about working closely for both of us to thrive. As one, really.
And keeping sort of just a quick focus on partnerships, we've met because I've been at and I've attended Cranfield University and School of Management events where they've got a sort of business cluster and a tech cluster, and we're recording this podcast sat at the Innovation Centre in Silverstone Park. My business Longhurst is part of a Silverstone technology cluster. It's a 100-strong cluster, lots of tech businesses, high growth, those involved in engineering, autonomy, clearly. As well as professional advisors. How important do you think those types of cluster environments are for enabling and creating partnerships like you've just explained?
I think they're invaluable. I think it's absolutely vital because in the UK, actually, we could brand ourselves as the innovation country of the world. And I think that would be amazing. Today, we need, in order to be successful, we need to collaborate. We need an army of people collaborating to make a meaningful difference. And so hubs like this are fantastic. And the more we do that and break down the barriers of protecting and the gilded cage mentality, the better off we'll be.
And so regarding employment, I remember at the very first presentation that I saw you speak at Cranfield School of Management a couple of months ago, but then also one yesterday where I attended the sort of Cranfield Venture Day with 100 or 200 other entrepreneurs and budding business owners and what have you. You raised a really interesting statistic, a really interesting number, very powerful number, which was that, and correct me if I'm wrong, sort of unemployment data today is around circa 200 million globally, and that it's predicted that by 2030, which isn't too far away, that number potentially is going to rise up to something like 800 million.
Yeah.
Have I got that right?
You're absolutely right. That's a report from McKinsey, but it's also reflected in the World Economic Forum as well. And it's essentially the robots are coming, and artificial intelligence is gaining great ground in terms of its abilities, in terms of intelligence. And for me, that there are, and many people, there are huge opportunities within that. But also there's peril, because as the fourth industrial revolution approaches, there are lots of people that, unless we act now as leaders, will not have jobs. So we need tech people, we need flexible, adaptable, creative, neurodiverse people to take those jobs. If we don't act now, we will have many millions of people without purpose, without money. The wealth will be owned by fewer and fewer people. So it's a perilous time, and that's really why I've sort of considered leading with kindness in a digital age is absolutely essential.
So let's talk about just that phrase. So leading with kindness and focusing on Novacroft in this instance. So how are you today? But also, how are you today tackling that? But also, how are you preparing for the future of ensuring that you've got the right people, that you continue to attract and retain the right people, that you create the right ethos where you give back, pay forward. How do Novacroft approach that?
What's interesting in terms of Novacroft is what I see is we all need a purpose, and if we look for, which is nearly 11 years or just over 11 years away for 2030, and we look at that landscape of opportunity and potential peril of the future, if we track back, what do we need to do about it now? We need to prepare. So from sort of an umbrella helicopter view, first of all, it's looking in the education sector and saying, my future team is going to come from that education sector. So when I say about leading with kindness in a digital age, it's about encouraging children to recognize the value of kindness. It's about empathy. It's about respect. It's tolerance. And we've actually just recently launched in November last year the kindness book, which we now have in 15 countries. And we have actually just in the last few weeks have it in every school in Glasgow.
And this is part of the kindness movement?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so the kindness book, what's that? That sounds fascinating.
So the book is basically, it's a beautifully designed book. We give it to the school. A child opens a book, they write an act of kindness that one of their friends has done for them. Okay. And they can draw a picture as well. And then they ask their friend a question, any question, and their friend writes in the book the answer to that question. And then they hand that book to the next person, and they write their stories.
In the same school?
In the same school, in the same class or around the school. And it helps them bring into their consciousness that was an act of kindness. And we're already getting stories back And they're beautiful stories,
I bet.
simple stories, and
bet.
we've got them. I've just recently looked at some stories that come back from Romania, and they're really heartwarming stories. And we want to bring all of those stories back and keep doing it. But initially, in November this year, in readiness for Kindness Week, we're bringing all of those stories back, and hopefully to do an exhibition
Wow.
in the House of Commons.
Wow.
To demonstrate that and to use that as a way of saying, this is the future. We need people to have the well-being of citizens, of humanity at the heart of everything we do. And then when we look at tech, so for my business, tech, it's all about people and tech. And when we look at tech, we have to ensure, in terms of kindness, that all tech is written with the well-being of humanity at its heart.
Okay.
That's really vital. Inside that is, if we look at the future and we look at what good looks like in terms of its rising to the opportunities and avoiding the perils, then we have to think of what does the future of good look like. And so within the charity sector, for instance, what will their part be in that future? And we are now in our organisation looking at how we can help those organisations become digitally able.
Okay.
How can we help them be ready now for the future? And similarly in the transport sector, how can we help them enable their passengers be more mobile and in public transport use? And then that leads me into the sort of third stream in terms of leading with kindness in a digital age, and that's about leadership. And for me, and in terms of the wider picture, but also my own business, is what worked until today is not going to work for the future. So what I mean by that is many businesses have a hierarchical structure. That's tradition. There's a leader and there's followers, and it's a top-down. We hand things down to other people.
Yeah.
But I've always had a sort of a collaborative approach. But for me, this is around a different type of leadership. It's reinventing leadership to be appropriate, and that's more collaborative. We live in a complex world, which is we need fluidity, and when we talk about change, it's about being adaptable to the point where I would say in the future, the word change may disappear from our language because we need fluidity. And so in terms of my team, attracting and keeping the talent is now around helping them see what the future might look like and navigating their way through their careers. So today's developers have to be thinking about what skills they need to be able to embrace the future. Because in one sense, if they're not careful, they will be today's manufacturing line.
Okay.
So that's a really important thing. So helping them see the futures, it's my responsibility to help them see what the future might look like, and to also help people that in my team and definitely in the wider community as well to recognise that we need to upskill people. We need to open their minds that there is something amazing that we can untap and unleash, and you can have a massive impact on society.
For sure, they just need encouragement. They need to be shown that, and they need the right training and support. I think there is. Anybody can achieve anything, really. With the right support. I mean,
I think so. It's sort of interesting that you use the word training, and forgive me for this, but it's sort of the words that training is. I tell you something, you absorb that information, and you regurgitate it, and it's a little bit of in terms of the way that we learn now, I think has to change. It's sort of facilitated learning. It's not necessarily about doing things in a silo in terms of the traditional ways of doing it.
Yeah, you're right.
So I'm really quite keen to embrace a new way of doing it.
Yeah.
So
no, that's fine.
Help people.
And you're right to point that out. So that's okay. You also, during your presentation, showed a fascinating slide about again, presumably through the McKinsey report or otherwise, the predicted sort of future roles that will exist or be important, and the ones that will clearly potentially fade away. And the ones that could potentially fade away will be things that clearly robots, AI can take care of, from picking boxes through to otherwise. But some of the really fascinating ones that remained, which certainly resonated with me very powerfully, certainly with what we do at Longhurst, was about empathy and about human beings and about personal touch. What are your thoughts on that?
We have to have. I mean, leadership is going to change dramatically, and I think traditionally, you see, I still hear it now. It's still common that when people go to work, they put on this sort of a different person suit.
Sure.
So if I go to work, I need to wear this armour. To the point where I've people in my team have a different name at work to they do at home. That's the kind of, that's, one might say it's quite extreme, but there's a detachment. And one of my friends says we're a very connected world, but we're disconnected, and I think that's a really great statement. And it is around, to be successful in a new age and to ensure that we are controlling the robots, we have to ensure that we're enabling our minds and bringing talent that thinks in a social, emotional way.
Caring capitalism. Before we started the recording, we were chatting and talking about lots of different things, and we spoke about capitalism and whether people believe in it or otherwise. The permanent advance exists if you look at all of the data, which we do as financial planners. But the great capital markets continue to advance, businesses evolve, grow, technology clearly is just running ahead. But the fear of capitalism is greed, as you identified earlier, money and the control of money and wealth and power, falling into smaller and smaller sort of group of individuals or corporate entities. But you then use a fantastic phrase, which I'm going to steal. I'm going to tell you that now. Caring capitalism. So we've clearly touched on some of this already with what we've been speaking about, but just summarise caring capitalism, if you could. Is there something you could say?
So, rightly so, organisations have to make profit. The public obviously have to balance their budgets. So capitalism is required, but if you're caring capitalism, then so if we look over the next decade, and we look at the future, and we look at AI and the amazing opportunities, currently we're not really looking at how we govern any of that. So if we take the top 6 in the States, we take the top 6 in China, etc. Currently, they need to find their profit.
Yes.
So we're losing Alexa now and all these fantastic devices. As we move forward, there's nothing to stop them doing whatever they like to get more of our money.
Sure.
Exactly. So where is the care in that? So it's really up to us now as leaders. And when I say caring capitalism, is helping our teams. Helping our teams recognise what value they can add to the future to help them steer and navigate their futures. And 2, it's a real responsibility for us now to start looking ahead and saying, okay, let's get together and develop technology which has the well-being of citizens and humanity at its heart.
Yes.
You can still make money. I think that's fantastic. We've made money in the economic downturn that we've had. The great thing, the positive things of those are it enables organisations to lean up.
Absolutely.
You become agile, the mind of a fox comes in,
Sure.
And off you go. And so it's a fantastic opportunity. You don't have to be at the cost of. It can be including caring for people.
Presumably that's a big challenge and a big ask if you consider those top 6 as you've explained. The power of Google, the power of Amazon. They're big brands that presumably they're very well trusted, and people trust brands. Their ability to influence our opinion and potentially even our acceptance of the environment that they're actually creating potentially for their own corporate gain. That's clearly a risk to us, I guess.
Well, it absolutely is a risk, but when you look back at over the last sort of 40 decades, that's far too long.
Sure.
40 years.
Yeah.
Then you look and say, well, Google came from, Apple came from the garage. They were small organisations, small teams when they started. Now is the right time for new small teams to flourish.
Yeah.
And I think we are, our generations now have much more care in their mindset about, what have we left them? Yes. We have to make sure that we leave them with the right opportunities, the right environment, the right climate for survival. And that's really important. So everything we do now, we have a responsibility that those 6, they will change. There will be new ones coming along that will blast the socks off them.
Yes.
Because they're already getting gilded cage mentality. They're into protection. So everything they're growing is protecting. Where is their revenue? Where's their profitable revenue coming from? They're protecting. That's the mind of a hedgehog. We need the mind of a fox. And those are the organisations. They're all around us. Sitting here in this innovation hub is inspiring. It's energising. The more people that come together, the more likely we are to have a better future.
And what's the future of Novacroft? What's over the horizon? What have you guys got planned or projects you're working on that you can talk about or otherwise?
For us, we're very excited. We've helped a lot of organisations today, and our mission now is to really help organisations be fit for the future in order to help citizens. So we're focus on both transport and charity, and in the charity sector we believe that they can have a meaningful impact on all of our futures. They need to be ready for it. So now we're developing technology, digital front ends, back end systems, helping them reach out to volunteers, to their members, to help them feel that they belong and feel valued. And that, I think we can help them a lot in that sector. And also in the charities, in the transport sector, is around mobility as a service. So it's helping people get to where they need to be and get rewarded for it in as best way we can. So delivering those things to the doorstep, to their hands, basically, and also encouraging people to get active, recognising that, providing a better experience in terms of a journey.
So bring it back to Novacroft, in relation to the solutions and products and services that you offer. At the very beginning of the chat, I sort of listed through things from smart ticketing, etc. So can you, so for our listeners, certainly for STC and Silverstone Park members and those sort of outside that could potentially become clients, customers, or indeed even partner and collaborate with you, what sort of products and services you're working on at the moment?
So we've got things like online portals, developing with payment processing, authentication. We have fraud detection, which is it's a very big deal in all areas.
Yeah,
so
huge.
Where you've got, particularly where you've got something which somebody might apply for, which has a value, which is greater than what they're paying for. Is actually, we've done a lot of work in terms of detecting fraud, and that's already starting to demonstrate huge return in terms of millions of pounds, which is superb. We have products which are about eligibility checking. So, for instance, in the transport sector, as an example, where a transport provider or a local authority needs to provide free travel or subsidised travel to one of their citizens, those citizens have to validate or validate that they qualify for whatever it is. Some of that process requires those people to go into a location and take all of this material with them. It means that they can't get access to what they need quickly, like today. They have to wait, they've got to go through a process. And it also means that for a local authority, they've got people doing things that ought to be doing more value-added stuff, doing stuff which is not necessarily valuable to them. And so we've developed a system that learns. So it learns the kind of materials and then can do that through basically online. And it's proving to be very successful. They're all born out of problems. So where people have got, typically in all of the sectors we work, they've all got challenges with their budgets. So we're helping them use their budgets more effectively and then use their team members more effectively, their employees, they would call them, more effectively. We've developed a program called You Can Do It, and that's a get active through walking, running, cycling, volunteering, learning, having your say, and get rewarded. And we're applying that to lots of organisations. So, for instance, Virgin Trains used it to encourage their team members to get active. And to see the impact that made.
So this is sort of focused on employees within an organisation?
Well, so it can be employees, and we're currently looking at it in terms of in the charity sector for volunteers. Good idea. To get them to set up events so they can create events, people along, how they feel about it, have their say, etc. And again, in transport, so if you're using public transport, if you spot something that's not working, you put it on the site. If you want to walk the last couple of miles or mile home after you've got public transport, get rewarded for that, etc., etc. So it's about getting people to do things, and that has a great impact in terms of reducing the amount of people needing hospital beds. Well, that's what it's about, isn't it? It's all about prevention as opposed to dealing with it, after the event. So we've got a great thing actually, which we're looking at in terms of health. Across the UK is helping local authorities that are delivering health improvement programmes to do that in a way which is inclusive and that they can work with their citizens in a way that is a two-way regular communication, which helps them it helps those people stay engaged, which I think is really vital. And how do you identify what the problem is? So presumably, and this is me just pre-thinking, are you going into an organisation or an authority, sitting down with them, running through budgets, and then identifying potential issues or hurdles and saying, okay, well, if we applied this logic and potentially implemented this type of solution, if it could be built, which it can, because it can, this would be the output. Well, we approach it in different ways. So one is a helicopter view on what's happening in the world. And then if we kind of come down a few levels from that, we would, when we're talking to an organisation, we might sort of say, so what's happening at the moment? Have an exploratory discussion, and then look at the problems. Often the problems that they say they're deeper than that. So you kind of get down to the root cause, start looking at that rather than putting an elastoplast over the problem. Sure. Another thing that we do, which we're doing in the charity sector, is set up a hashtag charity forum. And that's bringing together a group of senior leaders in the charity sector to look at what does the future of doing good look like, and what part do charities play in that, and where are they now, and then looking at how, so where they are now, how do they get there, and looking at what are the barriers, what are the challenges to getting there, and what are the opportunities, and basically creating an amplification of a voice to say, okay, we now need action. So we understand the problems, we need action. So some of the actions we might actually help with, but actually it's a bigger conversation to help the charity sector really embrace those and move forward. Okay.
very busy lady, Debra.
Yeah, I love it.
Quite a lot. So Novacroft, we've covered off, obviously Genesis, what you guys have been doing, solutions and projects, smart technology, clearly huge work within the sort of volunteer space, and hopes for developing your team and growing and retaining the best members. Focus on care and capitalism, empathy, leading with kindness, which I just absolutely love, from obviously the book, the kindness book. Presumably that's, so you said Romania, so presumably that's global. So you said it's obviously in a Scottish school, but obviously Romania, obviously in countries all around the world.
We have it in 15 countries already.
Oh, wow.
That was only started in November 18.
Immense.
I know, it's phenomenal. And I think it's interesting when we talked about care and capitalism earlier. We're knocking on an open door when we start talking about care.
Yes.
Because, I say that people are coming to work with this sort of different facade, or have done until today. And I think when we're authentic, we're talking, and actually people want that. Yeah. They really do. And so we're looking in the UK to have sort of kindness as part of the curriculum. Yeah. I think it's really important. So, I think it's critically important, especially, obviously Mental Health Week or Awareness Week this week for the recording, which is in May 2019. Yeah. Huge, mental health, personal well-being. True, and I think, one of the things that's really important is being kind to ourselves. Sure. And often, so we talk about kindness, leading with kindness in a digital age. That means, first and foremost, before you can help anybody else, you have to help yourself. Yeah. And that is taking time and saying, okay, hold on, I need to care for myself first. You need space, you need fresh air, you need time away from whatever you're doing. It's something that I have to have discipline with personally, because I have a thirst to make a meaningful difference. I love thinking about stuff, and my brain could become quite easily completely overpacked. Yes. And so just taking time to be outdoors, time to walk the dogs. Yeah, absolutely. Time to be with your family and enjoy and relax. And I think also to be brave enough to realise that you need to do that, and face the reality that perhaps there are some steps that you still need to take to get on that path. And I think also, I suppose, the realisation that I've had is that you set the agenda. So if I were to be there in my organisation 18 hours a day, then that's set an expectation of others, and that's not right. And I've learned since having my son that many people go through horrendous trauma in their lives, and when you're talking to somebody, you have no idea of that. No. And so the first thing is to recognise that we're all human. It's what makes us amazing, and it is actually what differentiates us from robots. Yes. And it's actually having that empathy and recognising that we can all help each other for good. Bravo. Love it. Right. Cranfield, School of Management. That's how we met. You were speaking. I was just in awe, doing a podcast about it now. This is why. I'm thinking about signing up to one of the programs personally. I think I'm ready for that as an entrepreneur, business owner. What was it like for you, and what's it like sitting on the advisory board, which is something you're now doing? Okay. I came to Cranfield back in 2007, and at the time my business was growing. We'd had, every business has, you might have to bleep this out, but every business has a shitty stick. Yep. Every so often. I'm not bleeping that out. And we'd had a couple of those, and I think it can be a lonely place. Yes. If you're not careful. So this thing came across my desk from Cranfield, and it was a business growth program, and it really resonated with me. I thought, well, let's give it a whirl. And it also said at that time they would give you money back if you didn't like it. can't beat a money back guarantee. You don't see those these days.
You don't get too much of that, so I can totally understand. Why wouldn't you do it? Yeah.
So actually, in my life, that program had the most profound impact on me personally and on my business. Oh. And I think it's because, one, the Cranfield itself, although it's spread as a campus is spread, the energy in there is superb.
Yeah.
The team at Cranfield are phenomenal. And then the program itself was really well structured, and then you met lots of amazing people that different, all absolutely totally different types of businesses coming together, but with common problems,
yes,
and common challenges, opportunities, kind of thing, and that really helped me. I think when I came out of it, I probably a little bit like going into an untidy bedroom, pulled it all out, it looked worse, and then put it back together again.
Yes,
a little bit like that.
Yeah.
And I think so. For me now, being on an advisory board, which I feel is a great privilege, is that Cranfield itself has been through its time of challenge, and like most education institutes. And Professor Lynette Riles has done an amazing job there of bringing the School of Management into a place which is really having a massive impact, and it's what we need over the next decade. And so it's now in a position to really motor forward. And for me, to be part of that is because it resonates with me in terms of we need to educate the generation to be in the right place, to help them learn in an appropriate way for the future. And I think Cranfield are really well placed for that. So to be able to support them. And the wonderful thing about life happiness, learning is part of happiness. And
Indeed.
For me, as part of that advisory board, not only am I helping, but I'm also learning. And that's brilliant.
Just enjoying it.
Yeah, and I respect them immensely, and I think they will have a profound impact on our future.
Right. I'm going to start pulling the interview to a gradual end, if that's okay.
Yes,
I appreciate you're a very busy lady. And I want to let you get back to, I'm only a lady on the weekend. So anyway, that's a private conversation. Before I ask the very last two questions, which I always ask everybody, is there anything that I haven't asked that you'd like to cover off whilst we've got you on air and we've got you here? Anything about Novacroft or the kindness movement or anything else, indeed, that you want to sort of mention?
I think probably, I mentioned earlier about the shitty stick. I think I'd probably like to just cover one of those, actually.
Done.
And the reason why. So I think in business that there's a sort of feeling that somebody starts a business or nobody ever really thinks about the start of a business. They see a business growing, they see people talking about success. Well, actually, in the journey of an organisation growing, you have some amazing times and you have some difficult times. And to me, it's about having a purpose, and for me, it's about seeing people grow and making a meaningful difference to society. And that has helped me through some of the difficult times. So just to talk about one shitty stick, if you like.
Yeah.
Just over 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I looked at my organisation and looked at the way that it was going to grow, and I looked at my personal need to start a family. And so I developed a management team, and they were in place, and I went on to an adoption journey.
Okay.
And during the journey, it's a challenging journey, that I, as CEO, was part of the business, but had stepped away from quite an element of the business.
Yeah.
Although I had a helicopter view on what was happening and could just sort of make sure everything was okay. during the time of the latter part of the adoption process, some things happened at Novacroft which meant I didn't have information. I couldn't get my hands on information. And I remember walking, I've got miniature schnauzers, 2 miniature schnauzers, which are beautiful dogs.
Yeah.
I've got 2 beautiful boys. Walking them in the woods, and my son had probably been with us for about 6 to 8 weeks, and it was an incredibly challenging time.
I bet.
So I've got a challenging time at home, a challenging time at work, because I couldn't get my hands on the information I needed. And I was walking in the woods, and I just thought, okay, I have to do something here, because if not, I'm going to burst.
Yeah.
It's not going to be good for my health.
Yeah.
And it's kind of thing came, life is a journey, and that's what matters. I need to do something now to stop this. And so I got in touch with my accountants, and I asked them to do some investigation, because I had this gut feeling that something wasn't right. They did some investigation, and some things were not right.
Okay.
And essentially, I lost £1.2 million.
Okay.
And in that, I had huge amount of shame. I felt shame that I'd let that happen. And I wrestled with it a lot, and that I'd let my team down that were there outside of those the people involved in it. And then realised I've got to shake this shame off, because it's not doing me any good. It's certainly not doing anybody else any good.
Yeah.
And thankfully that only lasted probably about 10 days to 2 weeks, because then I thought, right, okay, we are going to rise up from this. Is because of that is not going to take this company down. It's
not going to define you.
Great team. It's not going to define me. And I looked around. I read Cotter's book on transformational change, which was fantastic. I created a cohort in my organisation from around the organisation of 25 people. I brought them together. I told them what had happened in its entirety and the shame that I felt. I was very open and honest with them, and we said, we have a chance to change this. Do you want to do it? And we got together, and within 12 months, we came back absolutely on track. I talked to all of our clients about what had happened and said, this is what we're doing. We had a plan. So that team created a plan together. And through communication, we made it happen. And I think whilst it was a very challenging time, both personally and for the organisations, we made some changes to the organisation. We thrived as a result of it.
There we are.
And so to me, when I reflect on that, the fantastic thing about it is if you allow yourself to be vulnerable and you open up to people and talk honestly about the situation and be collaborative and allow people the flexibility and the freedom to be leaders, so that you take different parts as and when it's appropriate. So leaders and followers, however you want to describe that, then you thrive. Had I have taken a different route to say, I'm not embarrassing myself by telling people that, I'm never going to talk about it, and just gone into the organisation and gone, right, this is what's happening, I suspect the business would have failed.
Wow.
And by the way, I now have a fantastic son who's adorable. He's such a star, so brave.
Well, with a mother like you, no doubt, and 2 dogs to walk in the woods. My God. So the next 2 questions I normally ask, I'm not sure I'm going to, normally focus on sort of embarrassing mistakes. And even though that's not an embarrassing mistake, it's still something that happened within a business that you've learned from and clearly fought back from, pulled your socks up, 10 to 14 days and thought, sort of, fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
This isn't defining me as an individual or our business. Collaborated with your team.
Do you know what? I could tell you an embarrassing story.
Go on then.
I on holiday, and we're sitting there in this really kind of, it seemed like a tumble down shack, great restaurant on the edge of a beach that served lobster.
Nice.
I thought, this will be lovely. Sun's going down. So we say, we'd like a whole lobster, please. That would be lovely. And the waiter comes over and shows us a live lobster, which was, no, thanks, don't. Anyway, it arrives. I've got this lovely, so here we are, we've got the lobster there, I've got the claws out, the sun's coming down, it looks beautiful, the right music's playing, there's a hum of people around us. I get the claw on this lobster tail, it cracks, this lobster claw goes probably about 10 foot in the air and lands on a guy's plate. This super huge guy, looked like a Viking, landed on his plate, and I thought, and he just turned to me and he said, "Shit happens." and I saw him after we walked out, and he was standing outside with his partner, and I said, "I will always remember that."
Yeah.
And it's funny because that was before that episode, and it is. Shit happens, get on with it.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me. But at that time when it happened, it splashed all over him and everything.
Oh, it's a good chap, right? Good chap. Lots of lessons to learn there.
Yeah.
And so that then kind of neatly leads on to my last question, which and I think you've given lots of potential examples of what the answer to this is. But we know we've got students listening to the show. You know, we've done a podcast at Kingsthorpe College, which is in Northamptonshire. In partnership with Silverstone Park and Gaia Innovation, who Silverstone Park have basically employed to help deliver schools-based projects to help connect employers here with the schools, which is great. Next generation. So we know we've got the students listening. So this question is really for them, also young entrepreneurs, I guess, or even older entrepreneurs, I guess, anybody. You're clearly an exceptional master in your field, lots of lessons, bumps and bruises along the way, but coming through it clearly successfully with a smile.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you were to go back to a younger version of yourself, let's say, late teens, early 20s, a little bit green, a little bit wet behind the ear, full of enthusiasm, what one bit of advice would you give yourself?
Wow, pinning it down to one piece of advice. I might have to do a sentence which includes lots of pieces of advice.
Done.
It'd just be a very long sentence, but it would be one sentence.
Done. That's fine. I'm going to keep this recording.
I'm here to bend the rules.
Sure. Why not?
Okay, so I would say dare to be different. It's good to be different. It's good to stand out from the crowd. It's great to be head and shoulders above the crowd. Forget the crowd. Don't be like the crowd. Trust yourself. Look around. What are the opportunities? Look to the future. Read. See. Look, what are the challenges? Forget fear. I lost my parents to not have, and had no fear when I started the business. You don't need to have that extreme.
Sure.
Forget the fear. Just do something.
I have nothing else to add to that. Debra, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is the last episode of season 2, and it's been an absolute blockbuster. So thank you so much for coming on.
It's been a privilege. Thank you.
As I mentioned before we started recording, we're going to be evolving the podcast into doing a lot more sort of collaborative podcasts with other masters in their field and experts. And so I would absolutely love at some point to get you back on, maybe with 1 or 2 or 3 other individuals, to talk maybe about kindness,
Cool.
To talk about diversity in the workplace, to talk about the future.
Fantastic.
About being human.
I like that.
I thought so. I do. So I'll think of 2 or 3 others I think will also be into that as a concept with meaning and power, and we'll get you back on the show. But for now, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris.
The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst for the benefit of those with a passion for all things tech, engineering and innovation. For more information, please visit longhurst.co.uk/Inside Silverstone, whilst also remembering to give us a 5 out of 5 star rating on iTunes. Please note that neither Chris Broome or Longhurst work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Circuit or Silverstone Technology Cluster.